Yeah, you're on the ridge of Ebeloilo, yeah? That's Tupurela Kolaguma, Daboya. And no white man has ever walked this track. So, you're about to make the greatest discovery of civilization.
I don't think so.
We're gonna find a lot more out here.
But no Auwo yet.
It's the lost rights.
The lost world with the lost species contained within it. We're at 1,000 meters.
1,000 meters.
Our camp is at 870.
Holy shit.
We're in the wrong river.
Hi everyone, my name is Isaiah Scott. I'm a student studying ornithology and science communication.
And I'm Jordan Borsma. I'm a research associate here at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and was one of the members of the Auwo expedition that we're going to be talking more about in this video.
So today we're going to be answering some questions that you all have relating to Auwo and the entire expedition. So let's get right into it. So Jordan, your first question. It's kind of a combined question from Charlie_Fairfax and Samuel Koss LV3. So how many individuals did you find of Auwo, and how many do you estimate there are?
For the number of individuals that we found, so we know that there are at least 2 from our trail cameras. So we got 1, which was the image that we were looking at, Doka and I, when we were responding to that first ever photograph of the bird. And then we realized later that one of our other trail cameras that was about 5 or 6 kilometers away from there had recorded a video of a pheasant pigeon, of an Auwo. So we know that there are at least 2 individuals from those 2 trail cams, because they're far enough apart, certainly different individuals. And the IUCN Red List, which ranks the black-naped pheasant pigeon as critically endangered because it had been so long without any formal documentation, estimates that there are between 100 and 249 left. It is New Guinea's most endangered terrestrial species. That estimate isn't based on any formal surveying, and so it's a very, very rough estimate. So follow-up work is needed to determine how many are likely left and exactly what areas they remain in. We know from our hunter interviews that there aren't that many hunters who are familiar with this species to present day. And so generally what we found is that the hunters across Ferguson Island that we interviewed had really high quality knowledge about their birds. They knew the species in their forest really well. And the vast majority of them weren't familiar with the species, at least not to present day. There are many who knew it from the 80s or 90s, but hadn't seen or heard it since then. And so because we trust the information from those individuals, what that tells us is that there probably aren't many areas where this bird still remains, so probably aren't that many left.
Our next question is from JFerg120. How long did the search take?
We had a total of 1 month to look for Auwo, and most of that time was spent doing interviews with hunters across a variety of villages in East Ferguson. And it wasn't until the last week that we found a couple of hunters who had recent reports of the species. And then it wasn't until the final day of the expedition where we went to fetch our trail cameras that had only been up for 48 to 72 hours, where we got that first image of the pheasant pigeon and got the video of Doka responding to that trail cam image. So that was literally the last moment of the expedition. So it was extremely dramatic. At that point, we had more or less given up on the search, and we were just packing up and leaving the island and making plans to do follow-up work because we believed the species was in this forest, because we really trusted the hunters we were working with. But we really didn't conceive of the fact that we could have an image of the bird on the trail camera, because we know they're not particularly common, they're pretty elusive, and we didn't have much time where those trail cameras were up. And so that moment that's now made the rounds so many times on social media was the last moment of the trip before giving up on our month-long search for the species.
So our next question is from Craig Salad Sandwich. And what's your favorite thing about Auwo?
It's hard to have a favorite thing about a species that I haven't actually seen or heard firsthand before. None of us on the team ended up seeing or hearing the bird ourselves, despite putting in so many hours to looking for this one species. It was only our trail cameras that detected it. But from what I know of this species and other pheasant pigeon species, is that they have these really far-carrying vocalizations, calls or songs that this really mournful, really powerful, like resonant sound. And so the way that people usually find pheasant pigeons of the species that are more understood is to hike steep ridges and listen for them on either side of the ridge, which is what we did looking for the black-naped pheasant pigeon. But we never heard them ourselves. But as far as we know from the locals who gave us that local name, Auwo, that's describing the sound of their vocalization.
Okay, so my next question that I have for you, Jordan, is from C. Bowles. Why is it important to correct people when they say you discovered/rediscovered something?
So one thing that's been lost in a lot of the media coverage of the rediscovery of the black-naped pheasant pigeon is that the way we designed our expedition was to tap into local indigenous knowledge of bird species, which again is generally really good in New Guinea, to look for the species that had been lost to Western science since the 1800s. So it's true that it had been lost to the scientific record since the 1800s. However, we did find hunters, who I mentioned earlier, who had recent reports of the species, and a lot of hunters who knew the species back in the 80s or 90s. And so to those folks, this wasn't a species that needed to be rediscovered. And we know now from having worked with these individuals and, kind of tested their knowledge with our hunter interview protocol, but also working directly with them to validate these reports that we were getting of the species, that they know what they're talking about. They know their birds. And so their observations should count. And so to say that this species hasn't been seen since the 1800s or hasn't been documented isn't exactly accurate, because it's not acknowledging that local knowledge. The landowners who have continued to observe this species since Western scientists last collected the species back in the 1800s.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to make that distinction between Auwo being rediscovered as a whole versus Auwo being discovered in Western science, because people, as you were saying, like there's people on Ferguson Island that has this knowledge about Auwo. It's very important to not overlook those experiences of the local people. All right, Jordan, we are on our last question. Are you ready?
Ready.
Awesome, let's do it. So, Extinct Birdstagram. Shout out Extinct Birdstagram. I follow him on Instagram. Really amazing content. He asked, does the future look bright for conservation in the biodiversity hotspot that is Papua New Guinea?
The keys for conservation, not only on Ferguson Island as it relates to Auwo, but across New Guinea, are in the hands of the traditional landowners. And really what's needed are opportunities to offset the revenue that would otherwise come in from resource extraction companies. So I know from working in these communities for so many years that generally people would much prefer to pursue those avenues for capitalizing off their immense natural resources over selling or leasing to resource extraction companies. But those opportunities are harder to come by.
We get it! Holy shit, man! Shit! Oh man, this is the happiest moment ever!
Well, thank you everyone for submitting all of your great questions. We're very excited to answer them, and please stay tuned for more of our content.
Okay. Woo!